The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the ballroom as Sophia Chen adjusted her emerald silk dress one final time. Out tonight was supposed to be perfect. Her engagement party to David Martinez had been planned for months, every detail. Carefully chosen, from the white roses cascading down the walls to the string quartet playing softly in the corner. At 26, Sophia felt like she was finally stepping into the life she had always dreamed of, the Hotel Grandview's ballroom. Buzzed with conversation as guests in elegant attire sipped champagne and admired the view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Sophia's parents, Michael and Linda Chen, stood near the entrance greeting arrivals with warm smiles. Her father, a successful businessman, spared no expense for his younger daughter's special night. David appeared at her side, handsome in his tailored black suit, his dark hair perfectly styled. He was everything she had thought she wanted: successful, charming, and seemingly devoted to her. They had been together for 2 years, and when he proposed 6 months ago on a beach in Hawaii, Sophia felt like the luckiest woman alive. "You look stunning tonight," David murmured, taking her hand. His smile seemed genuine, but something in his eyes flickered for just a moment before returning to normal. The evening flowed smoothly until Rachel Chen made her entrance. Sophia's older sister had always commanded attention wherever she went. At 29, Rachel was a successful lawyer, with striking features and an air of confidence that made people notice her immediately. She wore a stunning red dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her long black hair styled in elegant waves. Rachel approached the happy couple with a smile that Sophia would later remember as too bright, too calculated. "Congratulations, little sister," she said, embracing Sophia warmly. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." Something in Rachel's tone made Sophia pause, but before she could analyze it further, David stepped forward to greet Rachel with what seemed like excessive enthusiasm. The way they looked at each other lasted a fraction too long, their smiles a little too knowing. The first sign of trouble came during dinner. Sophia noticed David and Rachel exchanging glances across the table when they thought no one was looking. When David excused himself to take a business call, Rachel followed shortly after, claiming she needed fresh air. They returned separately, but both seemed flustered in a way that made Sophia's stomach tighten with unease. As the evening progressed, Sophia tried to push away her growing anxiety. She mingled with guests, accepted congratulations, and posed for photos, but the nagging feeling that something was wrong continued to grow. Her best friend Emma noticed her distraction. "You seem tense," Emma whispered during a quiet moment. "Everything okay?" Sophia forced a smile. "Just wedding nerves, I think." But it was more than that. She had caught David checking his phone repeatedly, his expression serious. When she asked about it, he brushed off her concerns with vague mentions of work emergencies. Rachel, meanwhile, seemed unusually animated, almost giddy in a way that struck Sophia as odd for someone simply attending her sister's engagement party. The breaking point came when Sophia decided to look for David to discuss their honeymoon plans with some guests who had asked. She searched the ballroom but couldn't find him anywhere. A waiter mentioned seeing him head toward the hotel's private garden area. Sophia made her way through the quiet corridors, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. The garden area was dimly lit, with pathways winding between carefully manicured hedges and flower beds. She could hear voices coming from a secluded alcove near the fountain as she approached. The voices became clearer, and her blood ran cold. It was David and Rachel, and they were not discussing wedding plans. "We can't keep doing this," David was saying, his voice urgent. "Sophia is starting to suspect something." "She doesn't know anything," Rachel replied, her tone confident. "She's too trusting to see what's right in front of her." Sophia pressed herself against the hedge, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they would hear it. Through a gap in the leaves, she could see them standing close together, David's hands on Rachel's waist. "This is getting complicated," David continued. "Maybe we should wait until after the wedding to make our move." Rachel laughed, a sound that sent chills down Sophia's spine and let her think she's won. "David, we've been planning this for months. The trust fund money she'll get after marriage will be enough to set us up for life. Then we can be together without any financial worries." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. They were talking about her inheritance, the trust fund her grandmother had left her that would become accessible only after marriage. She had told David about it in confidence, never imagining he would use the information against her. Once we have access to the money, we can stage a messy divorce, Rachel continued. I'll represent you, of course, and we'll make sure you get a significant portion. Sophia will be too heartbroken to fight properly. David pulled Rachel closer. You're brilliant, but what about your parents? They'll never forgive you for this. I'll get over it, Rachel said dismissively. They've always favored Sophia anyway. It just levels the playing field. Sophia felt like she was drowning, gasping for air, as the full scope of their betrayal became clear. This wasn't just about David leaving her for Rachel. This was a calculated scheme to steal her inheritance, destroy her emotionally, and leave her with nothing while they lived happily ever after on her family's money. She backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise. Her mind raced as she processed what she had learned. Everything about her relationship with David had been a lie. Every sweet word, every promise, every moment of intimacy had been part of an elaborate con game designed to rob her blind. When she reached the ballroom, Sophia stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at all the guests celebrating what they believed was her happiness. Her parents were laughing with friends, completely unaware that their older daughter was plotting to destroy their younger one. The irony was bitter and overwhelming. Sophia walked calmly to the head table where her purse sat. She retrieved her car keys and took one last look around the room. These people, many of whom had known her since childhood, had no idea they were witnessing the last moments of her old life. She slipped out through a side exit, avoiding the garden area where David and Rachel were still plotting her downfall. The cool night air hit her face as she walked to the parking garage, each step taking her further away from the life she had thought was hers in her car. Sophia sat for several minutes in stunned silence. Her phone buzzed with text messages from Emma, asking where she had gone, but she ignored them. Needed to think, to process, to decide what to do next. The evidence of David and Rachel's betrayal was clear. Confronting them now would only alert them to change their plans. They would find another way to manipulate her, perhaps more carefully hidden. The thought of continuing this charade even one more day made her feel sick. Sophia started the engine and drove out into the night, with no destination in mind except away. As the city lights faded in her rearview mirror, she made a decision that would change everything. She would disappear, let them think they had one, and then return when she was strong enough to destroy them both. The engagement party would continue, without the bride-to-be, but Sophia Chen was already gone, driving toward a future that David and Rachel could never have imagined in their greediest dreams. 3 months after disappearing from her own engagement party, Sophia found herself standing on the weathered dock of Moonlight Bay, a small coastal town 800 miles from her old life. The salty breeze carried the scent of seaweed and freedom as fishing boats bobbed gently in the harbor. She had chosen this place precisely because it was the opposite of everything she had known: quiet, unpretentious, and far from the social circles where David and Rachel moved. The transition had not been easy. After leaving the hotel that night, Sophia had driven for hours before stopping at a roadside motel to think. She had used her personal savings to disappear gradually, closing accounts David knew about while keeping others secret. She told her parents she needed time to plan the wedding and would be traveling for inspiration. The lie had bought her space, though she knew it would not last forever. Now, living in a small apartment above the Moonlight Cafe, Sophia worked as a waitress under the name Sophie Miller. She had dyed her long black hair to a warm chestnut brown and learned to tie it back in a simple ponytail. Without designer clothes and professional makeup, she looked years younger and completely different from the polished executive she had been. The cafe was owned by Martha Rodriguez, a kind woman in her 60s who had fled her own troubled past. Decades earlier, Martha asked no questions about Sophie's background and seemed to understand that some people needed a place to hide while they figured out who they were meant to be. Table 6, once their coffee refilled, Martha called from behind the counter as the morning rush began. Sophia grabbed the coffee pot and weaved between tables filled with fishermen, tourists and locals starting their day. The work was simple: but satisfying in ways her corporate job had never been, or something honest about serving people food, about the immediate gratitude in their eyes when she brought exactly what they needed. No office politics, no backstabbing, no hidden agendas, just coffee, conversation, and the rhythm of tides outside the window. It was during her 3rd month in Moonlight Bay that James Whitmore walked into her life, though she would not learn his real name for several weeks. He appeared on a foggy Tuesday morning, tall and lean, with dark hair that looked like he had been running his fingers through it. His clothes were simple: jeans, a gray sweater, and worn leather boots. But something about the way he carried himself suggested he was used to commanding attention. He chose a corner table and ordered black coffee and toast, pulling out a laptop that looked expensive despite his casual appearance. Sophia brought his order and noticed his hands clean but calloused, as if he worked with them regularly, but took care of them too. "Just passing through?" she asked the question she posed to most strangers. "Something like that," he replied, his voice deep and measured. When he looked up at her, his gray eyes held an intelligence that made her suddenly self-conscious about her ponytail and stained apron. James became a regular, appearing every few days at different times. Sometimes he worked on his laptop, sometimes he read thick books about technology and business, and sometimes he just sat and watched the harbor through the window. He was polite but distant, never sharing personal information beyond pleasantries. About the weather, Sophia found herself looking forward to his visits, though she could not explain why. Perhaps it was because he seemed as disconnected from the world as she felt. Or maybe it was the way he treated her with genuine respect, rather than the casual dismissal she had grown used to from entitled customers. The first real conversation happened during a storm that knocked out power to half the town. James was the only customer in the cafe when the lights went out, and Martha had gone home early. Sophia lit candles and continued serving coffee heated on the gas stove. "This is actually nice," James said, looking around at the flickering candlelight. "Peaceful. You sound surprised," Sophia replied, settling into the chair across from him since there was little else to do. "I spend most of my time in places where the lights never go out, where everything is always connected, always moving." He paused, studying her face in the candlelight. "What about you? You seem like someone who's used to a different kind of life." The observation was too close to the truth. Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "What makes you say that?" "The way you handle people. You're good at reading what they need, but you do it like someone who learned those skills in a different context. Plus your hands." He gestured to where her fingers rested on the table. "Those aren't the hands of someone who's been waiting tables for years." Sophia looked down at her hands, noticing for the first time how soft they still were despite months of work. She had been careful to create a new identity, but apparently not careful enough. "Everyone has a story," she said finally. "Some people just prefer to keep theirs private." James nodded, accepting the deflection without pushing. "Fair enough. I'm not exactly an open book myself." As weeks passed, their conversations grew longer and more personal, though both remained guarded about their pasts. James revealed that he had grown up wealthy but estranged from his family, that he had built something successful but found it empty. Sophia shared carefully edited versions of her own story: a bad relationship, a need to start over, search for something real. The attraction between them grew slowly, built on shared morning conversations and the comfortable silences they could maintain while he worked and she cleaned tables. James had a way of making her laugh that she had forgotten was possible, and his presence brought a lightness to her days that had been missing since her world collapsed. The turning point came on a warm evening in late spring. Sophia had finished her shift and found James sitting on the dock watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. She joined him without invitation, letting her feet dangle over the edge. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked without looking at her. "Your old life?" Sophia considered the question carefully. "I miss feeling safe. I miss believing that people meant what they said. But the life itself, no. It was built on things that turned out to be illusions." "What kind of illusions?" "That love was enough. That family meant loyalty. That if you were good to people, they would be good to you. She kicked gently at the water. Naive, I know. James turned to look at her then, his expression serious. Not naive, human. The fact that people disappointed you doesn't mean you were wrong to trust them. It means they were wrong to betray that trust. Something in his voice made her study his face more carefully. You sound like you know something about betrayal. It's more than I'd like, he admitted. People want things from me that have nothing to do with who I am. After a while, you start to wonder if anyone would care about you if you had nothing to offer. Sophia felt a connection click into place between them, the recognition of shared wounds. Is that why you're here? To find out who you are without all the things people want from you? Something like that? He reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and steady. What about you? You figured out who Sophie Miller really is? It's the sound of her assumed name on his lips sent a shiver through her. She realized that somewhere, in the months of hiding, she had started to believe her own fiction. Sophie Miller was simpler than Sophia Chen, more honest, less afraid. But she was also temporary, a character she had created to survive until she was strong enough to reclaim her real life. I'm working on it, she said, not pulling her hand away. That night, James walked her back to her apartment above the cafe. At the bottom of the narrow stairs, he hesitated, then leaned down to kiss her cheek softly. The gesture was gentle, respectful, and it made her heart race in a way that surprised her with its intensity. Good night, Sophie, he murmured, and she watched him walk away into the darkness. Wondering how someone she barely knew could make her feel more seen than people she had known for years. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. James would arrive early and stay late, helping her clean tables and lock up the cafe. They took long walks along the beach, sharing stories and dreams while carefully avoiding the details that would reveal too much about their true identities. Sophia began to feel something she had not experienced since before David's betrayal. Hope. James made her laugh, challenged her thoughts, treated her with a respect that felt revolutionary after months of feeling worthless. When he kissed her for the first time under the lighthouse at the end of the pier, she felt like she was coming back to life. But even as happiness crept back into her world, Sophia knew this peace was temporary. Eventually, she would have to face the people who had tried to destroy her. Eventually, Sophie Miller would have to become Sophia Chen again. Armed with the strength and clarity she had found in this small town by the sea, she just had no idea that James was keeping secrets that would change everything. Or that the man who had helped her heal was about to reveal himself as someone with the power to help her win the war she had been avoiding. The truth would come soon enough. But for now, Sophia allowed herself to believe in the possibility of love without lies, in a future built on honesty rather than manipulation. She had no way of knowing that the universe was already preparing to give her exactly the weapons she would need for the battle ahead. 2.5 years after her disappearance, Sophia received the invitation that would change everything. Elegant cream envelope arrived at the cafe on a Tuesday morning, dressed to Sophie Miller in handwriting she recognized immediately. Inside, embossed in gold letters, was an invitation to Rachel Chen's wedding to David Martinez. Sophia stared at the invitation for several minutes, her hands trembling slightly. They had actually done it. After destroying her life and stealing her dreams, they were celebrating their victory with a wedding that should have been hers. The date was set for 6 weeks away at the prestigious Ocean View Resort, the same venue where Sophia had once imagined her own wedding. Bad news? James asked, appearing beside her table, where she had been frozen in shock. Over the past year, their relationship had deepened into something neither had expected. James had become her anchor, the person who made her believe in love again. There were still secrets between them, carefully maintained boundaries that kept their pasts separate from their present happiness. An invitation to my sister's wedding? Sophia said quietly. Handing him the card, James read it carefully, his expression growing serious. To David Martinez, the man you were supposed to marry. Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She had told James about David's betrayal, but had never mentioned that her sister was the other woman. Some wounds were too deep to share, even with someone she trusted. Are you going to go? James asked, settling into the chair across from her. Don't know. part of me wants to show up and expose them for what they really are. But another part of me thinks I should just let them have their victory and move on with my life. James was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through to her soul. What if I told you that you have more power than you realize? That you could not only expose them, but ensure they face real consequences for what they did? Something in his tone made Sophia look at him more carefully. What do you mean? Pulled out his phone and opened a web browser, typing quickly before turning the screen toward her. The page that loaded made Sophia's breath catch in her throat. It was a Forbes article titled "Tech Billionaire James Whitmore Announces Major Philanthropic Initiative." The photo showed James in a perfectly tailored suit, standing in what appeared to be a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city skyline. He looked confident, powerful, and completely different from the casual man who had been helping her serve coffee for over a year. James Whitmore, Sophia read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. CEO and founder of WhitmoreTechnologies.net, worth estimated at $4.2 billion. She looked up at him, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. You're a billionaire. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, James said, his voice gentle but serious. I came to Moonlight Bay to escape the pressure of that world. When I met you, I realized you were running from something too. I didn't want to complicate things by revealing who I really was. Sophia set the phone down carefully, her hands shaking. So everything between us has been based on lies. Just like with David. No, James said firmly, reaching across to take her hands. Sophie, what we have is real. The only lie was my name and my background. Everything else, every conversation, every moment we've shared, has been the most honest relationship of my life. Sophia wanted to pull away, to retreat into the protective shell she had built around her heart. But something in James's eyes stopped her. Unlike David, whose affection had always felt calculated, James looked at her with genuine fear of losing. Her, why are you telling me this now? She asked. James glanced at the wedding invitation. Because I think it's time for both of us to stop running. You deserve justice for what they did to you, and I have the resources to help you get it. Over the next hour, James explained his plan. Using his connections and wealth, he could investigate David and Rachel's activities since Sophia's disappearance. If they had indeed accessed her trust fund through fraudulent means, there would be legal consequences. More importantly, their reputations in their respective professional fields would be destroyed. But there's something else, James continued. Something that would send a message they'll never forget. He pulled out his laptop and showed her photographs from various society events over the past 2 years. In several of them, David and Rachel appeared together at charity galas and business functions, clearly established as a couple in their social circle. They've been living off your trust fund money, James explained. The private investigators I found evidence that David has been using your inheritance to fund their lifestyle. Legally, since you disappeared and never formally broke the engagement, the trust fund money is still supposed to be held in escrow. Sophia felt a cold fury building in her chest. They've been spending my grandmother's money while I've been waiting tables and living in a one-bedroom apartment. Exactly, and that's where my plan comes in. James turned the laptop toward her, showing an email he had already drafted. I'm going to make a very public donation to several charities in your honor. The announcement will go out the day before their wedding, and it will include the story of how my fiancé inspired me to give back to causes that matter. Sophia stared at the screen. Your fiancé? James smiled, pulling a small velvet box. From his pocket, Sophie Miller, or Sophia Chen, or whatever name you choose to use. Will you marry me? Not for money or status or any other reason except that I love you more than I thought possible. The proposal was so unexpected that Sophia felt like the world had tilted on its axis. Here was a man worth billions asking her to marry him, not for what she could give him, but for who she was. The contrast with David's mercenary approach to their relationship was staggering. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, I'll marry you. The ring was beautiful, but understated, a perfect reflection of the man she had fallen in love with in this small coastal town. As James slipped it onto her finger, Sophia felt the last pieces of her broken heart clicking back into place. The next 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. James had insisted on hiring the best legal team to investigate David and Rachel's activities, and the results were even worse than Sophia had imagined. They had not only accessed her trust fund, but had also taken out credit in her name and used her social security number for various financial schemes. More damaging was the evidence of their relationship timeline. Text messages and photos proved they had been involved for months before Sophia's engagement party, making their entire courtship a calculated deception designed to access her inheritance. 3 days before Rachel's wedding, the story broke across multiple news outlets. Billionaire tech CEO exposes elaborate inheritance fraud scheme, read the headline in the Wall Street Journal. The article detailed how James Whitmore's investigation into his fiancé's background had uncovered evidence of identity theft and financial fraud committed by her sister and former boyfriend. Sophia watched from James's penthouse apartment as her phone exploded with calls from reporters, family members, and former friends. Her parents had left 17 voicemails, their voices progressing from confusion to anger to desperate pleas for her to call them back. The most satisfying call came from David himself. Sophia answered on speakerphone so James could hear Sophia. "Thank God you're alive." David's voice was strained with panic. "We need to talk. There's been a huge misunderstanding about the trust fund money." "The only misunderstanding," Sophia replied calmly, "was me thinking you were a decent human being. I hope you enjoyed spending my grandmother's money, David, because you're going to be paying it back for the rest of your life." "You don't understand the pressure we were under," David pleaded. "Rachel convinced me that you would have wanted us to be happy." Sophia laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "I wanted you to be happy, David. I just didn't realize it would require destroying my life and stealing my inheritance." She hung up before he could respond and turned to James, who was watching her with obvious pride. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Powerful," Sophia replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. "For the first time in years, I feel powerful." The wedding that was supposed to celebrate Rachel and David's victory became their public humiliation. Photos from the event, obtained by enterprising journalists, showed a sparse crowd and a bride whose face was tight with barely contained rage. The reception was cut short when federal agents arrived with warrants for both. David and Rachel's arrest, Sophia watched the news coverage from the comfort of James's arms, finally understanding what justice felt like. It wasn't just about revenge or getting her money back. It was about reclaiming her power and refusing to let their betrayal define her story. 6 months later, Sophia and James were married in a small ceremony on the beach at Moonlight Bay, with Martha from the cafe serving as matron of honor. The guest list included the fishermen and locals who had become their true family, people who loved them for who they were rather than what they could provide. Rachel and David's legal troubles would continue for years, but Sophia had stopped paying attention to their story. She had written a new ending for her own life, one that included love without lies, success without sacrifice, and a future built on the solid foundation of truth. Standing on the beach where she had found herself again, wearing a simple white dress and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her happiness, Sophia finally understood that the best revenge was not destroying her enemies, but building a life so beautiful that their betrayal became irrelevant. The waves crashed against the shore as she kissed her billionaire husband, the sound mixing with the laughter of their guests and the promise of all the tomorrows that belonged to them alone.